I'm going to get this video done this time. It's going to happen. Whatever I do, you're going to see. That's how it is, ladies and gentlemen. I have been trying to do this video for the last hour, and every time I get started, something happens. So whatever happens, this is it. I don't care. I'm going to post it. I'm not stopping the recorder. Okay. Greetings and salutations. This video is going to be about something that I am very passionate about, and that is music. We're going to talk about my digital music library, how I created it, the tools I use to do that, and the reasons why I do it the way I do it. This is not going to be a how-to video. It is not going to be a tutorial of any kind. If you end up learning something along the way, that's great. Really what I want to do is just kind of show you what I've got, what I have built up over the years, and why I do things the way I do them. There is probably better software out there to do this. There's probably a better way to do this. Probably be better organized. I understand all that stuff. Like I said, I've been doing it for a long time, for 20 years. This picture is where I want to start, because I want to tell you all a little story before we get going. Now, I realize that this subject matter in this video is not going to be for everybody, because not everybody is into this the way I am. I understand that. Fortunately, you are on YouTube, and there are billions of other videos to choose from. So if music is not your thing, then you can go find one of those groovy videos where people take household items and run them through a grinder. Those are nice. Car crash compilations are good, that sort of thing. However, if you're into this, I hope you'll enjoy it, because I'm just going to ramble on and talk about this. And how much sense it's going to make by the end, I have no idea. I have some notes over here, and they don't even make a whole lot of sense to me at this point, because I have like literally started this video 4 or 5 times. So anyway, here we go. This is it. Way back in the year 2000, I worked for this company that owned a radio station called 2WD. And this is a picture of 2WD's studio. I actually worked across the hall at WVKL. That was my main station. But like most radio stations these days, 2WD is part of a cluster. They had such a nice looking studio. I took a picture of it, and I kept it all of these years. And the reason why I wanted to show you this picture was not to talk about 2WD so much, but I wanted to talk about this box you see sitting on top of the bridge over the console, this big bulky looking monitor. What that is a very early touchscreen, and it is hooked to a music server or an automation system or an audio server or whatever you want to call it. And at that time, we were using a system called Scott Studios. Scott Studios has been absorbed now into Google, and it now lives on as Orbit 18 years later, and 2WD still uses that. By the way, the real call letters for 2WD are WWDE. They're licensed to Hampton, Virginia. The studios are in Virginia Beach on Clearfield Avenue, and they're still there. They're still in the same place they were when I was working there, although this studio has completely been redone since then. It doesn't look anything like this. So for those of you who are interested in that sort of thing. They're on 101.3 FM, and they have been on the air in the area that I live in since 1978. And I was living in this area at the time. And then shortly after I worked here, I moved away. I was gone for many, many years, and I've just come back. So I know that is not really pertinent to what we're talking about, but I figured I would throw that in there. I've been in and out of the area for a long time. Anyhow, while I was working for this company and using the Scott Studio system, a fella came to work there by the name of Mitch Allen. And up to this point, hard drive space on your average home computer was not big enough to really hold a great deal of music. As a matter of fact, when the Scott Studio system came along in the mid-90s, I worked at a station where we put one in, and it had a 9 gigabyte hard drive in it, which at that time was huge. This hard drive that came in this thing was the size of 2 5 1/4 inch across drives that you would put in a computer for a DVD or a CD-ROM or something like that. It was two of them stacked up, and when it ran, it sounded like churning butter. But it was so cool. We could take 9 gigabytes and put files in it with audio in those files, and then we could call them up later, or the system could do it automatically. It was a big deal in the late 90s and early 2000s. Well, me and Mitch got to talking one day, and we were thinking maybe it's about time that we started figuring out how to create a music library that we could have for ourselves, because what we were doing was we were throwing music from CDs into these systems. We were ripping it in or dubbing it in. Those are the only two things that you can do, and I'll talk about ripping and dubbing a little bit later on. We wanted to do something of our own. We wanted to create our own library. We were kind of like upwardly mobile at that point, and we were, our next big gig was going to be a program director. We wanted to be a program director at a radio station, And so we thought it would be cool if we had our own music library that we could have on like an external hard drive, and we could tuck it under our arm, and we could do that. And storage was getting cheap at this time, so we could do it on our own system. So this was right around the time when MP3 was getting popular, and people were starting to do things like rip their CDs and put in the computer. So that's the direction that we went down. I have a huge collection of CDs that I started collecting in 1984, and I still have them, and they're not going anywhere. I don't want to hear any of this crap. Well, I don't need that because now you can just rip it all in the computer, and then you could don't. No, I like having the physical thing. Thank you very much. I've been carrying them around with me for 30 years. I'm going to keep doing it. So when I say digital music, I don't look at it as an end-all, be-all, like, oh, take all of your physical things and put it in the computer, because that's a recipe for disaster. If you don't know how to back things up, and if you don't keep a lot of redundant copies, you could lose all that real easy. It's so easy to lose things. So keep your physical stuff, gang. Do it. That's what I say. Whatever you want to do is fine with me. I don't care. But that's what I do. Let's put it that way. So anyway, me and Mitch started working on this idea, and we started putting together this library from our own music collections that we had. And then we got some other people involved in this. One of the early people that got involved in our efforts was a fellow named Tom Kent. And Tom was the fellow radio type person who was starting out his own syndicated show. And Tom did a show on the radio called Coast to Coast, Hall of Fame Coast to Coast, because it was coming from Cleveland, where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was. And he did this rockin' oldies show. And you may have heard it if you were part of the United States. Well, we kind of helped Tom get started, and we helped him get some music together, and we helped him get his recording stuff set up and all kinds of things like that. So there were several people involved in this, and I can't remember everybody else's name. The one that I remember now pretty much is, Tom and Mitch were the two people that I talked to. I didn't really talk to other people that were involved in this project. And we worked on this for about 10 years. And then tragically in 2010, Mitch committed suicide. He had some issues that he just could not get over. And it's one of the really big, sad things in my life. I was a very good friend, and it was very, very tough for me to lose Mitch. So I have held on to the music library that we worked on, and I have kept it all these years and kind of built on my own. So that's where my interest in this started. And of course, from day one, we wanted to come up with something that was enough quality to be able to be played on the radio. And a really super high quality MP3 file, you can play that on the radio. Most people will not know the difference. As a matter of fact, if you listen to standard terrestrial radio, chances are half of what you're hearing is coming from really high bitrate MP3s. So for the audiophile crowd out there, you might find you're like, ugh, but we did it all the time, and it's just the way it was. Radio's a little bit of a different ball game. Anyhow, before I leave this, let me give you a quick tour of what you're looking at beyond the Scott system. Over here on the bridge, these are Denon 950 FA CD cart players. This is where you take a CD and you put it in a case, and then you take the whole case and put it in the player, and then when you're done, you just pull the case out of it. Those were used in radio stations starting in the late 80s when CD started to get big on, as a format for playing back music on the air, up until the 2000s where the hard drive stuff came along. Now, you don't find these in radio stations that much anymore. If they do have a CD player in the studio, it will be like one of the Denon professional machines where it's like a regular tray player. This is an EAS system right here. That is a network of it's like a daisy chain network that radio stations can do to pass information about emergencies. In the United States, all radio stations are required to have an EAS receiver and to send out EAS messages. And then underneath the big monitor for the Scott system there, you have the controller for the transmitter that sent the telemetry out to the transmitter to be able to turn it on and turn it off. And the transmitter is in Newport News, Virginia, and the studios are in Virginia Beach for 2WD. So they talk to each other via microwave link. And then over here is an old Mac. This would have been probably Mac OS 9 at the time. And it's running a program called Vox Pro that has a dedicated controller plugged into it. And we use that to record phone calls and edit them. So that's what that Mac is doing there. And I figured I would give you some sort of tour before we left the studio. I'll go ahead and get out of that. And we're going to talk about Rhythm Box, and we're going to talk about Asunder, which is the program that I use to rip CDs. We'll get into that here in just a bit. But before we get into all of that, let me show you what me and Mitch worked on for all those years. I have it in a directory here called Chart Hits Archive. And when you open it up, you see that we have a bunch of directories that have years. So let us go to 1982. That's a good year. When you open that up, there's a whole bunch of MP3 files. Now, these are all of the songs that hit the charts that year. So we're talking about what made it onto the Billboard charts, which in the United States is what we, keep track of all that stuff. And if it was a top 100 pop hit, then it's in here. And it's top 40 country and top 40 R&B as well. So conceivably anything that you'd ever want to play on the radio, regardless of what genre the radio station was, country, or whether you're doing like oldies or whatever, if you want to play a song from 1982, theoretically it's here. Now this library is not 100% complete. There is no way that anything this large could be perfect. And unfortunately, there's some of the stuff that I don't have that I just never put in. Mitch had the master for this, and when he died, it got lost. So there's actually stuff in here that didn't make it in, which is pretty sad. Now, before we go any further, let me explain that this was all done under an ASCAP license. We intended to use this for playing it back on the air, and the music was licensed to the radio stations we were playing it back. So this is legal. They don't care where you get the music from that you play on the radio. You can go buy a CD, you can have a service send you a CD, you can download an MP3. It doesn't make no difference. What they care about to the record companies is whether they get their money, their royalties for you playing it, and of course the songwriters and all that stuff. So that's why we were able to do this without fear of prosecution or what are you doing. And we didn't share it publicly. It wasn't like this was on some server somewhere and people could just come and get music. So yeah, even though all of the crap was going on with Napster and WinMX and LimeWire and people doing peer-to-peer sharing of music, which caused all the problems back then, we weren't really doing that. Although I know for a fact that Mitch got some of the music from some of those places, but there you go. Now, I didn't mean to close that. I do that all the time, man. I have something open and be halfway doing it, and I close it. I don't know why I do it. So let's just pick another year here, because I want to show you Mitch made a huge error from day one. We just didn't know what we were doing. And like I said, this started about 1999, when we could afford to go out and get 40 gigabyte hard drives in our computers, because we figured if we had two 40s, we could get started with this. And an MP3 file at 192, the average file size for a song is about 5 megabytes. So you do the math. Actually, this library works out to be about 100 gigabytes for everything that I have in here. Anyway, the mistake that he made was that in his naming convention, he didn't know about tagging tools and the fact that if you put two spaces on either side of a hyphen, that you can use that to separate the artist and it becomes a delineator, and you could build a database and then you could generate tags that way. No, the way he did it was he did the year, and then he did the name of the group and then the name of the artist with no spaces, and then so therefore, even to this day, it would be extremely difficult to write a piece of software that would be able to separate that and rename those files automatically or generate tags. As a matter of fact, he had no interest in tags whatsoever. He paid no attention to it. And so when I started curating this library and my own end, I just stripped all the tags out of it and forgot it. There's no tag here. It's just an MP3 file, and that's the file name, and it contains all the information, and that's the way it is. I do not play music out of this library for my own entertainment. I just keep it around and for reference. Some of the stuff that Mitch put in there wasn't the greatest of quality, which is kind of a bummer. He would get a file from somebody or download something, and he would throw it in as a placeholder. And then he would keep notes and say, well, I'm going to make that better if I get another copy. And, of course, that hasn't been maintained like that in years. And I only have the library up to 2005. I think that was as far as he went with it as well, because what we were really concerned with was 20th century. We wanted rock and roll era, which is roughly 55 to 2000, and that's what the main focus was. So we didn't really do a whole lot after that. Anyhow, I have maintained my own library alongside of that, which we are looking at in Rhythmbox. So if I go to just library here and then scroll up to the top, you'll see that I think there's about maybe 5,000 different tracks in here. This is just my favorite stuff. And this mainly comes from my own music collection. I have a huge CD collection. I started seriously collecting CDs when I was in junior high school, and that was 1984 was when I first got my first CD. And so therefore I have this huge collection which I have put in myself, and then I have also gotten MP3 files from other places over the years. Some of it's come from the library that Mitch worked on. I will basically take a file from there, listen to it to make sure that it's decent quality, and then rename it and tag it for my own personal use. So that's how that's done. So let's just kind of go down the rabbit hole here a little bit and talk about where we're going to start out with. We're going to start out with the fact that I create MP3 files and the entire library is MP3. And it's, by the way, it's not just music. It's also, I have this directory in here called audio, and there's Bob's Music Cafe in here. That you might be wondering, well, what's that? It's a production library that I bought. It's production music. It's royalty free. So if I wanted to create commercials for radio stations, or if I wanted to create videos and needed music in the background, I have it in here. So there's a bunch of that kind of stuff in here as well. George Carlin, A Place for My Stuff. It's a comedy album somebody shared with me, and I just threw it in here. It's been here actually for about 10 years, and I can't take it out. My production, this is commercials and things that I worked on that have my voice on them, in case anybody wants a demo. Jingles and imaging, that's exactly what it sounds like. It's liners and stuff for radio stations, little promo clips and whatnot. Old-time radio shows, just a bunch of like CBS Radio Mystery Theaters and other things that I have collected through the years. Radio Audio Archives is air checks. That is recordings of radio stations that I worked at, recordings of myself, recording of other people, people that I grew up listening to on the radio, stuff that I collect. So it's all in MP3 format, every last damn bit of it. And there's a reason for that, and that's because I can manipulate MP3s in a way that I can't do other files. And I'm going to show you what that's all about. So if you want to create MP3s on your computer, you're probably going to have to make sure that you have a package installed called LAME, L-A-M-E. And that is the free and open source MP3 encoder. We started out using LAME. That's where we started. When we were first learning about this, that was the first thing that we did, was figure out that we're going to use LAME. And we used to use a program to rip CDs called Audio Grabber, which is a fantastic program that was written for Windows to do that. It gave you really granular control over the encoder, and you could also use Audio Grabber to convert WAV files into MP3s and do a real good job of that. And so it's, forgive my neighbor, it's like she's walked in and out of her apartment like 14 times, which is one of the reasons that I'm having a hard time with this video, so I don't care. I'm just going to try and ignore her. Anyway, LAME is an MP3 encoder that's available. It's in the Ubuntu repositories. All you have to do is do sudo apt install LAME, and that's it, and you've got it. And then you can use different pieces of software to get to it. Now, if you're going to take your CD library and you're going to put it in your computer, what I would suggest that you do, this is my suggestion for you, is that you use Rhythmbox to do that. It does a really good job. And if we go and look in the preferences for Rhythmbox, and we look under music here, you'll see that this is the format that it's going to do. It's going to create a directory, and it's going to be the name of the artist and the name of the album, and then it's going to put the files in there. It's going to be in here, and it's set to Ogg Vorbis by default, but you can choose MP3 audio, like here, MP3. And then you can choose your settings there and whatever. But the default Ubuntu settings will work just fine. I'm going to show you the hard way to do it. So we have this program called Asunder, which is a ripper. And it has issues. It's not perfect. And I will show you what those issues are. But it does the job of ripping audio from a compact disc very, very well, which is the reason why I like to use it. So if we go in here, I've put a CD in here. It automatically looks that up on the internet, and it goes and gets the information for the disc if it recognizes it, and it puts it in here. You can edit this if you want to. So let's say if the title's wrong, you can go in there and change that if you want to. Let's look under Preferences. We'll talk about how I have this set up. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to put it in my directory called Work. I do not want to create a stupid playlist. No, thank you. We'll talk about playlists a little bit later on. And I want you to eject the disk when you're finished. I do not want to create a directory. So I'm not going to rip the whole disk and put it into a folder or directory that's the name of the album. We're not doing it that way. Don't need a playlist file, so that's not set. What I want it to do is take the title and artist of each song and create a file that is the title or the artist for the song, space, hyphen, space, and then the title of the song. That's it. That's all I want. When we get down into encoding, and this is one of the things that makes Asunder a great program, is that you have a lot of different options. We have MP3, and I'm using 256 constant bitrate here to make my MP3 files. Years ago, when I was using Audio Grabber, we came up with we did a lot of experimentation to make this happen. I mean, we really did. A lot of listening, and we came up with our own custom presets for LAME, and we were doing them at 192 kilobits per second. I do not have access to the nitty-gritty of the encoder like I did in Asunder, like I did in Audio Grabber. So what I do is just do 256, and basically what that does is it creates a very nice sounding MP3 file. I can make them a little bigger now because storage is not so tight as it used to be years ago, so I don't really worry too much about file size. 256 is about right. I don't want to do 320, and the reason why I don't want to do 320 is there is actually some compatibility issues with 320. There's actually hardware that you can come across that for some reason, if you're trying to play an MP3 file like from a USB stick or something, that it won't deal with 320 or variable bit rate. So I used one of the stock standard ones there. Of course, now we're going off old information. Like I said, this is how I do it. I've done it this way for years. Things might have changed. So you can do OGs here. You can do FLACs. Now, FLAC is really cool. That is a way that you can store audio, and you can make the file sizes a little bit smaller because when you do WAVE, it's basically 10 megabytes per minute, which means that the average song is anywhere between 30 and 50 megabytes, which is pretty big for a song. And when you do some sort of data compression here, like MP3, OGG, Vorbis, something like that, that's the whole point. You're trying to get it smaller so it's a little bit more manageable. Unfortunately, with stuff like MP3 and OGG and even some more of the proprietary formats like AAC, that's what's called lossy. It means it's actually taking a little bit of the music information away. Hopefully it's taking it away in such a way that you won't be able to hear it, but if you do really low bitrate MP3s or OGGs, of course you can't hear it. So with FLAC, that is a compression system that compresses the data, and it does not take any of the music away. It's lossless. So that might be something that you want to look into if you have the storage space to deal with it. If you're like me and you're coping with 40,000 files, then that becomes an issue. And MP3 at that bit rate is fine. So that's the way that's set up. And you need to install LAME before you can encode MP3s. We get the disk information from CDDB, which is an online open source database that basically has every CD ever produced. Somebody has typed in the information and it's in there. And down here, this is when you first install this program is checked. It says faster ripping, no error correction. If you give a damn about the quality of what you're doing, turn that off. It will take some time. We don't care. So that's how you set up Asunder. Now, Asunder automatically creates MP3 tags when you do this, and they suck. And they have issues. So, and you have no way within here to actually get in here and do any preferences with that. You can't tell it that you want ID32 or ID31. You can't go in there and tell it what fields. It just basically generates a very generic tag. So that's kind of sucky. You can't go in and tell it, for instance, like, I don't want LAME to create joint stereo files. I want full stereo or dual channel. No, you can't do that. So this thing is actually creating dual channel, or rather joint stereo files, but at 256 it doesn't matter quality-wise. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. You can look that up and figure it out for yourself. It's how the encoder stores the data for stereo. When you do joint stereo, it uses a matrix, and when you do full stereo, it doesn't. And all. You can look that up. I'm not going to get into that in this video. Just not doing it. So let's rip a couple of hits off of this disc. Now, I chose Billy Joel's 52nd Street because this is the very first album that was ever released on a commercial CD. So we're going to do probably the two biggest hits off of that, which is Big Shot and My Life. And like I said, you can edit this. If anything in this field don't look right, you can change it if you want to. Here we go. And we're going to rip this. Now, because I am using full error correction, this will actually take a little bit of time. It's not super fast, okay? And you really, if you don't care about the quality, you don't care about pops, ticks, and clicks, then you could turn it off and it would be a little bit faster. But in the case of, what I do, I'm just such a perfectionist when it comes down to this that it needs to be done that way. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and when it's done doing it, we'll come back. And we're almost done. We're going to go ahead and let that eject. I've got the system set to automatically eject. Let me take that disc out. I'm going to actually rip a couple of songs off of another disc to demonstrate something in our next little part of the video here. So I'm putting in another album into the tray, and when it detects that, it will go out and get the information. You'll be able to see that it do it. Okay, there it goes. It found it. Okay, the name of this album is Sunken Condos by Donald Fagen, and it's from a few years ago. See if it's got it right. Yeah, 2012. So I want to grab a couple songs off of here. I'm just going to do Weather in My Head and Slinky Thing. A couple of songs once again. And turn the thing loose and let it rip. With MP3s, I don't know whether I mentioned this before, the higher the bit rate, the quality. If you can afford the space, you want to use 256 or 320. Or lossless if you want to. I think I mentioned that before, but I just want to make sure that you understand that. The default for a lot of older programs like this is like 128, which is really not enough to be good enough for like listening with headphones or something like that. But anything over 192, no matter what mode the encoder in, is usually pretty good. Alright, that's about done. We're going to have a couple of files to play with here. And that's pretty much all I wanted to show you about Asunder. It's a pretty basic program. Like I said, you can do that within Rhythmbox if you want to. That's an excellent program that I use. We'll look more at Rhythmbox here in a little bit. You don't have to have this. I like this because it lets me rip to different formats and I can change things with the encoder. So, we now have 2 MP3 files to goof around with. Let's go down here to Work and take a look in here. And this is the video that we're recording right there, the Dell screencast. So we're not too terribly worried about that. So what I want to do is I want to show you, as we kind of segue into the next little piece of software that I'm going to talk about. We're going to talk about MP3 gain, and we're going to talk about, if you have a very large music collection, making sure that the playback audio levels for your collection are going to be consistent. That's a real issue, and that's one of the reasons that I went ahead and grabbed these files from the 2 different discs. So if we look at the original disc from actually mastered about 1983 or 84 here of from the Billy Joel CD, this is the audio level that you're looking at. And I can't play you any audio because YouTube has gotten so crazy about copyright, they'll flag anything. And you'll notice that the meter on the side, that this doesn't go to like 100%. So as this audio is playing, you see there it was. Right? So now if I look over at this file, I don't want to open LibreOffice. Don't click that. Get out of there. Thank you. I wanted to go over here to this file. Notice that this is a lot louder, and that's because basically what they did was, starting about 1995, they started to run all of the audio they put through a compact disc through limiters and compressors to make it really, really loud. And they crushed the hell out of it, basically. Now, this disc is actually not bad compared to some of the other ones I've seen where you open it up in an editor like this and it just looks like a brick wall. And, you can't even see what's going on. But there's a difference here. So if we were playing this song in our player and then it went into the next one as it is, like it is right now, then what would happen is that they would be terribly loud. This song would be much louder than the one before it. And we diving for the volume control all the time, all that other kind of stuff. Now, there's this thing about setting replay gain that you can do. I don't do it that way, and this is one of the reasons that I stick to the MP3 file format, is that there is a program that's out there that allows you to manipulate the level of the audio in the program, in the file itself. And it's called MP3 gain, and I'm going to show you how that works here in a minute. But I want to show you one more thing, and this is a problem with Asunder. If I go to get info on this file, look at the tag information. It can't read it, man. It comes up in Chinese or Japanese or some kind of crazy stuff. So we have to fix the tags and we have to fix the audio levels for those files. And we're going to do that real easy. First of all, we're going to use a program called Tag Tool. Now, this is an old school tag program that is not in the repositories anymore for Ubuntu. At some point, they dropped it. So what I did is I have actually held on to the deb install file for tag tool, and this is the one that came with Ubuntu 16.04. And I kept that, and if I install that manually from the deb file, it works in 18.04. That's what I use. Depending on your distribution, you may or may not have this available to you. Of course, if you're running Arch, it's in the AUR. No problem whatsoever. But they decided to drop it in Ubuntu and Debian, and I don't know why. Pretty good program. So the first thing that I want to do with it is I want to get rid of all of the tags in these files that are in this work directory. And that's one of the things I like about this particular tool. It works by directory. It does not work by the files themselves. Or you can, I guess there's a way you can do that, but mainly it's done by directory. So let's go ahead and do this. So I have removed all of the tags. You notice we have version 1 and version 2. I have this set up to create a tag version 2, no version 1. That's the way I've been doing it for years. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the title and artist from the file name. I do not care about the name of the album. I do not care about the genre. Makes no difference. The year, anything else in the tag. Nothing. What I care about is the title and artist, because that's the bare bones that you need to make like an MP3 player work, or like the kind that you carry around with you, or most programs look for that information. I don't care about the album information. So let's go ahead and create that, and it just does it. Boom, it's done. So now if I open up one of these files with Ocean Audio, open with other application, Ocean Audio, thank you. Then you're going to see that when I go to get the info, that it makes sense now. It can read that because I blew out that messed up tag. That's a bug in Asunder. I don't know what the deal is. I have no idea. There it is. Now we're not quite done. The next thing we want to do is we need to get that gain problem sorted out. So what I want is that when I play one song after another, that they're going to be about at the same level as far as my ear is concerned. There are two ways of determining the level of audio in a digital file. That's peak and RMS. When we talk about the peak, we talk about the absolute instantaneous loudest moment in the song. And usually we try and set that right around 100% modulation digital, right? However, if you do that, that doesn't mean that one file is going to sound louder to the next than the other, or sound the same level as the next. That's what I was trying to say. So what we need to do is have a program that will actually go and listen to it like our ear, or act like an old VU meter. You see those like in the picture I showed earlier of the radio board. Those meters don't read peak. What they read is something called RMS, or root mean square, which is a fancy way of saying an average. Your ear listens to an average loudness. So a VU meter, volume unit meter, responds to RMS, and it's about the same as your ear. So we need a program that's going to do that. And the program that we're going to use is called MP3 Gain. Now, the MP3 Gain program used to be in the repos for Ubuntu, and they dropped it. MartIn Wimpress has kept a PPA that has MP3 Gain in it. And if you want to go find it, you can go get it out of that. What I have done is just downloaded the deb file for Ubuntu. I can't even know. I don't even. Well, yeah, I got it from MartIn Wimpress's PPA, and I will put a link to that in the description. And that's how I got a hold of it. And I just hang on to the little deb package, and I install it. They dropped it out of Debian. It was in Wheezy, but it's not in the later versions. It's, of course, in the AUR. You can get it. These little packages, just look for MP3 Gain, and hopefully it'll take you to MartIn Wimpress's thing where you can get it. So anyway, what it does is it analyzes the files first. And let me see, I've got the command already in the system here. And what it does is it analyzes the files first, and then it will change the gain of the file according to how loud it's going to sound when it plays back. So this will do this in two ways. It'll do it as an album. So let's say that I ripped the entire 52nd Street album in, and I had that in a directory. I can tell it that that's an album. So what it'll do is it'll find an average level across all of those, and it will make sure that if the producer, Phil Ramone, wanted one song to be a little quieter than the other, it will maintain that relationship across those files. However, what I do is I just do track gain. So that would be the flag R, and then I don't want it to clip anywhere, because with some tracks, if they're extremely dynamic, if it tries to turn it up to where it'll sound as loud as everything else, then in your library, then it'll clip it. Well, I want it to just turn that up to as loud as it can get it before clipping. So that's what the K option does. And if you want to learn more about MP3 gain, just open up your web browser, type in man, M-A-N, space MP3 gain, and the man page will pop right up and you can learn more about it. So let's actually put it in practice here and make it go. So it's going to go through and it's going to look at all these MP3 files that we've created. The first one it's going to lower by 2. It's going to lower the next one by 1. Donald Fagen is coming down by 5, and the other one is 4. Those are dB. That's how much it's lowered the file from the original. And it has an arbitrary number of 89 dB that it's shooting for as a root mean square average level. And like I said, if you're not an audio engineer, that doesn't mean a lot to you. If you just do what I just did to all of the MP3s in your library, as long as they're all MP3 files and it can recognize it, when you play them back, they'll all be the same level. That information is carried with the file. So let's go ahead and open up Ocean Audio again. There it is right there. All right. And now I'm just going to drag these in here. So we'll put Billy Joel. These are the files I just created, and we'll put them all in here and let the program open them up. And now you're going to see that when I click between the different files, that you can see that they're about the same level, about the same average level. See, now remember that Donald Fagen stuff, it's very highly compressed, so you can see where it's at there. So if I played those one after the other like that, then what you would hear is that they would all sound about the same level. So that's MP3 gain, that's tag tool as well. Those are the two pieces of software that I use. That's it. That's how I create the library. There is another piece of software which I want to show you, and that one is called Sound Converter. Sound Converter is very useful if I want to put something in my library that comes in as another type of audio, or if I create something originally. I will record something with Ocean Audio as a WAV file, which is uncompressed, right? And then I want to be able to convert that wave over to MP3. Well, Asunder won't do that for me like Audio Grabber used to. So there's another program that I have in here called Sound Converter. So what we need to do is, we can just do the ones in the work directory here. And I'll give you a real quick look at Sound Converter and how it works. So just type in sound. And you first have to add a file. We're going to add a directory. We're going to say you can do everything in work. And it's already going there. So we need to take that out because that's the file that we're recording if we're going to do this. So, it took everything out. Let me try that. Let's do it by file. Probably be easier to do it by file. Yeah. Open. Now this uses lame as well. And if we go to edit, we can look at our preferences. And I currently have this set up to convert everything to MP3 at 256. You can see that very high is 256. And you can resample things here. So what I'm going to do in this instance, I would ordinarily use this to convert a wave to MP3. So I'm not going to do MP3 to MP3. There's a danger in doing this, that especially if you're using lossy formats like this, that what'll happen is that, let's say that you want to convert an Ogg Vorbis to an MP3. You're re-encoding that, and you're going to lose some quality. So you don't want to do that. You want to leave the files original. But if I was starting out with a WAV file or something weird that I didn't have control over, then I might want to convert it. Let's go the other way. Let's make these, let's do FLAC. Let's turn them into FLAC files. And we'll leave that alone. With FLAC files, it doesn't matter about how much the file is compressed. It will not change the sound of the quality, at all, the quality of the sound. It's going to only affect file size and how long it takes to encode. So yeah, I've got that set to do FLAC now, and it's doing it in the same directory, and it will delete those files and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and watch this work. And once you get it going, okay, hit convert. It's a multi-threaded program, so it does it all at once. And now what we had as MP3s is in here as much bigger FLAC files. But you get the idea. That's how that works. Now you can set that program to do all kinds of groovy stuff. So you could have it where you could take an entire library of stuff and convert it over to, let's say that you wanted to do everything from now on in FLAC, but you had some MP3s. Well, you could make everything FLAC if you wanted to. The disadvantage to using FLAC is file size, and of course then you don't get the benefit of the MP3 gain program that I showed you. That's the main reason I stick with MP3. Yeah, I know it used to be a patent encumbered format, but it is not. So I guess that's about it, gang, for creating those things. If you are using Ubuntu proper, and this is Ubuntu, one of the Ubuntu main flavors, for the best audio playback of MP3, you want to make sure that you have a package installed called Ubuntu Restricted Extras, which if you choose at the beginning to have third-party files, third-party codecs and things installed, you should get most of that anyway, but I always go ahead and install Ubuntu Restricted Extras to get the rest of the codecs. You can have all that installed, but then you need to remove this particular one. It's called Fluindo. Fluindo is a company that sells MP3 codecs, and back in the days when Ubuntu could not legally distribute MP3, they would make it so that the user could download it. They offered this Fluindo alternative where you can play back your MP3 files, but they basically sound like crap. This particular file right here is nothing more than a program that makes GStreamers sound bad, and you don't need it. So if you remove this, if you notice that you install Ubuntu and you go to playback MP3 audio and it don't sound right, it sounds gritty and nasty, that's why. Get rid of this piece of software and move on. The idea is that to make your MP3 sound better, you would buy codecs from Fluindo, which costed about $35 last time I checked. And in this day, and that's a ripoff, sorry. So that's something that needs to go away, Ubuntu. They're still shipping that in 1804. I'm going to check to see if it's in 1810. I certainly hope it isn't. I hope it goes away. But I wanted to throw that in this video because I've thrown that in videos before about that. Now, let's talk about playing back audio real quick. And I'm going to show you how I do that. So if I go to audio and if I pick an audio file out of Radio Audio Archives, you will notice that it plays in a program called MPV. I do not have it set to play in Rhythmbox. I do not want to take anything that I click on and automatically throw it in the music library in Rhythmbox. Rhythmbox is for music only, and I have it set to where it's looking for music in the music library. So we can look under preferences. You can see that. So let's go under music. See, it's looking under files, Joe, home, music. There it looks there. It's where it goes. And then within there, I can create automated playlists. So I have all kinds of music in here. I've got country music and classical music and jazz and all kinds of crazy stuff. So I don't want that to play randomly. So I'm going to show you here very quickly one of the cool features working with this program, which is to create automatic playlists. So let's look at the rock and roll era playlist, and I go to playlist and I go to edit, and you'll notice that I'm having it look in the path. If the path to the file that's in the library contains 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, the rock and roll era, then throw it into a playlist. It's very cool how this works. So go to Billy Joel, for instance. We'll look at the same thing, edit. So it looks at the artist for each file that's in here. Remember, I created that title and artist so it can look under the tags. And any Billy Joel, it throws into this playlist. It's automatically generated. So are recently added and recently played. Those are generated by the program. So, for instance, when I did the Beatles here, I was playing around. Let me show you this. This is actually really cool. On the Beatles playlist, and I used this function where I could have a playlist that had not only all the Beatles songs, but all of the songs that I had from the Beatles as individuals as well. So that's all reflected here on this playlist. So if you go down to the bottom, I've got 2 Ringo Starr songs. I know that's kind of sad, but Ringo solo was never my favorite Beatle. This is coming out of my own personal library, gang. We have all the other songs somewhere else. So that's how that works. I will create one real quick. Now you can create 2 kinds of playlists in here. One of them is a static playlist. That's where you just drag and drop stuff. And then we have an automatic playlist. Let's create a new automatic playlist. It's so easy to do. So we're going to look for artist this time around. And we're going to look for any artist with the name Genesis in it, right? So we will go on and we will add another one. And we're going to do artist. And this time around I'm going to put in Phil Collins, my cousin Phil. So any Phil Collins or Genesis song will be added to this playlist. One attribute, we did that. No limit to how many you could put in there. And go ahead. So it created a new playlist. And now I'm going to call that playlist simply Genesis. Oh, no, I want to get rid of the new playlist part, dude. Okay. Very carefully click over here. If you just click outside, it won't take. It's a bug. So there you go. So now we have a playlist in there called Genesis. We're going to turn browse off because that gets a lot of junk in there. Most of my files do not have they have tags that I've created, but some of them have kind of screwed up tags that came from somewhere else, or something messed it up and I can't quite get rid of it. So if I do a browse on the entire library, this is kind of a weird thing about this. If I do a browse on the entire library here, come on, help me out. I want to go to library, man. Oh, that's why. Okay, clicking the wrong thing. So if I go to browse, you notice I get some junk that shows up over here, like Symphony No. 9 by Beethoven. Those tags have actually been stripped, but they won't go away. And the only way to fix that would be to re-encode those things. And I'm not worried about it. They play fine. It makes no difference. I don't use that browser function anyway. I just turn it off. So if anybody saw that garbage, you're probably wondering, well, why is it like that, man? So anyway, that's how I do it. Now, this program has a lot of other features. It can manage podcasts, which is pretty cool. I do use the digital radio to listen to a couple of things. So you can look up on how to do that. Like here's a local station that I listen to that streams, WGH there, and a few other things. Most of this is what comes with it, but I've added some things in there. So it's a very groovy program. I love Rhythmbox for playing back music. Some people really like Clementine. Maybe if I got into it, I would like it, but I'm really set in my ways, so I stick with Rhythmbox. I used to use Banshee as well, so you might go back and find old videos where I'm talking about Banshee. And so anyone will do. Also, VLC is a good player to have around. I have that. VLC is nice because it it can play videos and audio. I have them both installed. I have MPV installed. I just like MPV because it's so lightweight, because I can use it to play videos too, and it's just super lightweight that way. So anyway, gang, I think I've covered everything I want to cover in this video, and I know we've kind of just rambled on for a while, but that was the whole point of it, was just to kind of show you guys some of the tools that I used. In a summary, I realize that a lot of people these days, they either stream their music or they download it or whatever, but it all applies. It's all the same stuff. This is a library that I have built up myself from different sources over the years, and just near and dear to my heart. It's backed up all over the place. I even have backups in other states. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but I do. I have backups of this stuff that people are holding for me, like elsewhere, just in case. That's how important it is to me, just to try and keep it around. To be honest, this is one of the few areas where I think Windows has an edge. And maybe even Mac, but I've never really done this with Mac. I do know that there was a lot of software that you could get that really gave you very finite control over every stage of the process of taking the audio from a CD and putting it into a file, and MP3 gain is like, for instance, in Linux, there's no longer an MP3 gain GUI for the desktop or a graphic user interface. It's just command line at this point, and it's kind of, if I have to build that program from source, I will build it from source. I don't care if the day ever comes that MP3 gain just completely goes away, then I will cry forever. I will keep that code around if I have to keep the source code to be able to use it, because every file that I have done, every file that I have in my system has been put through that. It's that important. But there was a nice graphic user interface used to be for that. It's not available in Linux anymore. The one that was in Windows it was had a lot of options. You could do a lot of different things. The one of the few programs that I actually missed from running the Windows days, was Adobe Audition, because for audio editing, it's one of the best programs there was. It would do multi-track. Of course, I don't need to do that sort of stuff today. So if I do have to edit something that has to do with audio, I can do it fine. The little Ocean Audio program works great for me, especially if, really what it is you create a wave and then you just turn it into an MP3 and it goes in the library. I don't really need to do a whole lot of multi-track. I'm not making commercials or liners or doing a lot of voice work these days. So it's no big deal. But I do miss that program. I've heard good things about one for Linux called Reaper that's not free and open source. I think you have to pay for it or whatever. But I don't do that kind of work anymore. But I do miss Adobe Audition, because Adobe Audition would not only, it would let you, you could rip CDs, create MP3 files from it. You could burn CDs. You could create cue sheets for CDs where you were working with PQ codes, where what you would do is, like, for instance, you could make like a 80-minute whole long thing that was a continuous file, and then you could just drop the tracks on it. So the songs would actually segue together and kind of go from one to the other and overlap a little bit. And when you play back the CD, it's great. A lot of albums are done that way, where the songs kind of just fade into the next one. You could do that yourself, make it sound like a radio show. And I used to do that. And that software is, I don't know if there's software that does that on Linux. Now, I don't make mixed CDs anymore. I really don't. I just don't fool around with it. But I do keep this library going just to keep it going. Because at this point it's like an obsession. If it ever goes away, it goes away. Maybe one day they'll all get deleted and I'll be sad, but I'll get to start from scratch at that point, and that might be just as much fun. Now I'm really rambling. I need to shut up and finish this video. Your feedback is always welcome. Thank you so much for joining us at Easy Talk. That is a very fast growing group, and that is our forum, and you can be a part of that. It is free, secure, and fun. Also, if you're a person who hangs out on Facebook, give Easy Linux a like. We have a Facebook page. And you can check out easylinux.com for more about all of those things. Check out freedompenguin.com for lots of cool videos about Linux, lots of content from folks like me there. And the fellow who runs Freedom Penguin, Mr. Matt Hartley, always puts up something cool to look at. So do check that out as well. And I am gone. We'll do it again soon.